Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Illustrator by Eduonix Technologies. In this lecture we're going to be continuing the Build a City tutorial utilizing the perspective grid, as I'm doing right now, building my final building, and utilizing a lot of the things we've learned so far. So I'm going to keep this pretty simple, so we're not going to want to do anything more than we have to. So with Shift V, I'm just going to continue laying this out. I hit the 1 key, I'm going to align it to the center here, and with this one, I'm going to hit the 3 key as I'm dragging it, and align that to the center, and you may have to move it again to get it to snap. This is the sure way to make sure they're aligned. So I have my fire hydrant half, which is what I need to use the 3D revolve, and if you haven't watched this video, there's one on it that I did earlier, so go ahead and select preview, right edge, if you're making one of these two. And remember the settings from the other 3D extrude bevel. It was actually -37. And then just adjust the perspective. And you go by the wireframe. And you can put one of these. Also, of course, you can shrink anything because these aren't on the perspective grid. What happens if you do put one on the perspective grid is some interesting stuff. Which now I have one that is on the perspective grid, but it really doesn't do very much unless I want to stretch it. And then, in that case, it changes the shape. So you can make a lot of cool shapes this way too. So I'm just going to go back to the regular appearance without being altered to the perspective grid. I'm going to use the regular tools. So I put one in right over there, and as you can see, it's going to need to be shrunk some. It's probably easier to, that looks good enough. And if you really want to be exact, you're going to want to change the perspective of this. I'll zoom in, so you can see it's kind of pointing towards you, literally, a little bit too much. So we would just go to the appearances panel over here and click on the 3D revolve, go to preview, and just change the perspective. And if that doesn't work, there's other things you can do. To make it fit in. So now we have some items on here. And you could do a dome on top with the 3D revolve tool if you wanted to. But let's add some texture stuff to these shapes that are already created, like some gradients. Now because I grouped these before I turn them into perspective, I can't ungroup them to put a gradient on this face. But since we're at the end of the drawing, I'll just, as you can see, I'll just take these windows and Control X take this, put a gradient on that way. And this Control F when I'm done. And everything is still, except for this. You can redraw that if you want. But just make sure you ungroup stuff before you put it on. You can do your windows individually. In fact, there's a lot of people that do that. Say you wanted a giant bay window for some reason. You would start out with a square, and you'd hit 4 to make it flat. And then start with a circle at the center point, drag it to where it's flush with the sides, unite these, and now if I just drag it with the regular tool, obviously it doesn't do anything, but if I hit Shift V and then I drag it, I can set it up just like a regular shape. Make it skinnier. This is actually a very inappropriate window for building, but just to give you an idea and to show you a different shape. And this is why you don't want to group your objects before you put them on if you're going to edit them afterwards. So I can change this to that style. At least I can change all the existing faces to the style I just made. And you'll generally want the gradient on something like this to be a little bit darker right here. And you can do that just by clicking here and pulling down on that. You know, you can just go to town between the 3D Extrude and Bevel tool and the other tool. You can create a little city or many other different things in Illustrator. So, thanks for watching, and keep making your city. Keep setting it up and just keep experimenting with these tools. So when I move this out, I hold in 5, because I'm moving it parallel. In the end, it'll be parallel to where it was, and it's plane. So you don't have to hold in 5 when you're doing this, but holding in Shift helps. Anyway, this one, I'm going to be moving up to just about there, and like I said, this is my favorite way of doing it, is just Shift V and drag that anchor to where it locks in. That way you're sure it locks in. Now, if you didn't group these shapes before you put them on here, I did because I was going to mess with them too much. But if you didn't group them, you can edit the individual windows and such. You still can, but we'll wait till the end until we don't need the perspective mode to put in final touches and such. So I'm going to draw a roof out. So I just lock it in and let it lock into both corners like this. And I'm going to give this a lighter color. Just slightly. And now I'm going to do that to all of them. So just repeat that with all of them. The trick to doing this one right here is once you've laid out for this corner, go ahead and pull it out right here on that corner for the other one. And now that you have 2, you just wait till it locks into the other one. And right here you can put whatever you want. doesn't necessarily need windows or anything. Take this and make it like it's a billboard. Holding in Alt and Shift, I can shrink it down a little, copy that, go back, paste it in front, give it a color, or I can actually even do this to an image. So let's just make it a purple billboard right now, purple square. Or you could even just set it to one of these windows. So it's a gigantic window, I guess. So right now we're going to lay in some streets, and it's pretty easy. I just want you to lay in some streets in between these. You want to go from edge to edge. But you want them to be the same width, essentially, in the end. Although it's just mostly for appearances. And you're going to get a lot of this, so just go ahead and send it to the back. Because it's a street, it can be all the way on the bottom. So I've laid out some streets, and I also changed my buildings around a lot to make more sense, like the doors away from the roads. All the roads are the same color for the time being. If you go up to select, same, fill and stroke, you're going to get a lot of stuff. So you should have laid these out in gray. I didn't, but I'm going to change them all to gray with no stroke. And there's a nice street color. So right now I'm going to take the rounded rectangle tool, and I'm going to make some grass. Go ahead and change this to green right now, and send it to the back. Make sure you're touching the right things too. Like that, the anchor point to drag this out is all the way down here. And so that's our city so far. Obviously we need to send things to the back, send things to the front. If you can't send something to the back, try sending something else to the front, which may mean you have to do it for a few things. In this case, the grass is in its own little sublayer, and I just want to put it behind everything. Same with this building. These three particular ones, if I create a new layer, drag these in there, drag this layer to the top. So you might have some reordering issues. Just make sure that you don't change things so that your perspective grid doesn't work anymore. Now let's put a fire hydrant on this corner right here. So I'm going to zoom in. And I guess they're kind of in the grass. So I'm going to do 2 ellipses. Holding shift, they'll be square. I'm going to go ahead and make this a color to begin with. Like this color. remember just to hit 5 as you're dragging this to drag it in perspective. Make it a little taller. If you forget to hold an Alt or Option, then just go back a step, or I should say copy this, go back a step, and then paste. This is where you come in and just use the pen tool to create the rest of this, since you have the parts that are important. But rather than making small shapes in this fashion, you can use the 3D Extrude and Bevel tool. You just have to get the same settings as you have in this perspective grid, and you'll have to change the perspective of everything depending on where you put it. But for complex shapes, this is, and making complex 3D scenes in Illustrator, it's kind of a must, unless you're just going to draw it out by hand, which is fine too. So I'm going to make one with a 3D Extrude and Bevel. So basically the idea, and this is just a barrel, in this case, is to get it down. You're probably going to have 0 in a lot of these. And find out what your perspective is. Memorize it. These 4 numbers matter when you're setting up other things. But the perspective for each object, just do it individually to what looks right. You may have to zoom out to do that, but I'm content with this. And I guess this would just be like a blue barrel, whatever. This company has a blue barrel outside. So see, it has the rendering in there and everything too, which we're going to put the buildings with the gradient at the last step. So I'm actually going to draw a shape for a real fire hydrant and do the rotate tool, or the revolve tool, to get a really cool shape, and then apply, set that at some corners and change perspectives.